Why doesn't Joseph have a tribe named after him? Have you ever stopped to think about that? As Jacob's most beloved son, who saved his entire family from starvation and became one of the most powerful men in Egypt, why is his name nowhere to be found among the 12 tribes of Israel? It seems unfair, doesn't it? But the truth is quite different. Joseph was not forgotten. On the contrary, he received an honor that no other son of Jacob received. Today we are going to understand this biblical mystery that many people overlook and what it reveals to us about how God acts in ways that completely defy our expectations. But before we continue, if this content is helping you, please like it, subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell so you don't miss anything. Now let's get to the story. Joseph was Jacob's 11th son, but the first son with Rachel, the woman he loved most. Genesis 37 tells us that Jacob had a clear preference for Joseph and even gave him a special robe as a gift. This made his older brothers really jealous. Their jealousy grew to the point where they decided to get rid of Joseph. At first, they thought about killing him, but Reuben stopped them. In the end, they sold him as a slave to merchants who were traveling to Egypt. To hide their crime from their father, they said that a wild animal had devoured the boy. Jacob was devastated with grief. But what the brothers did with the intention of harming him, God used for a much greater purpose, as Joseph himself says in Genesis 50:20. Joseph arrived in Egypt as a slave. He went to work in the house of Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, and prospered because God was with him. But then came a false accusation from Potiphar's wife, and Joseph ended up in prison. Even in prison, he was not abandoned by God. He began to interpret the dreams of other prisoners with accuracy. One day, Pharaoh himself had 2 dreams that no one could explain: 7 fat cows and 7 lean cows, 7 full ears of corn and 7 withered ears. That's when they remembered Joseph. He interpreted the dreams clearly. 7 years of abundant harvests would come, followed by 7 years of severe famine. Pharaoh was so impressed that he appointed Joseph governor of all Egypt. He was only 30 years old. The plan worked. During the good years, Joseph stockpiled food. When the famine came, Egypt was prepared, and neighboring peoples, including Jacob's family in Canaan, had to come there for food. After a series of emotional encounters filled with trials, Joseph revealed himself to his brothers. There was forgiveness, reconciliation, and a moving reunion with his father. The whole family moved to the region of Goshen in Egypt. There, Joseph married Asenath, the daughter of a priest, and had 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. The names chosen by Joseph say a lot about what he had been through. Manasseh means he who makes forget, because God made him overcome all his past suffering. Ephraim means fruitful, because God blessed him even in a strange land, as Genesis 41:51-52 tells us. And this is where the story takes a surprising turn. Jacob lived another 17 years in Egypt after reuniting with Joseph. Feeling that the end was near, he called his son for an important conversation. This moment is recorded in Genesis 48. Jacob said something to Joseph that no one expected. "Your 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born here in Egypt before I arrived, will be considered my sons. Like Reuben and Simeon, they will have a right to the inheritance." With this statement, Jacob formally adopted his own grandsons as sons. But why did he do this? The answer lies in the concept of birthright. In the culture of the time, the eldest son was entitled to receive double the inheritance. Reuben was Jacob's firstborn, but he had committed a serious sin by having a relationship with Bilhah, his father's concubine, as recorded in Genesis 35:22. Because of this, he lost his birthright. 1 Chronicles 5:1-2 confirms this directly. The birthright was taken from Reuben and transferred to Joseph's sons. In other words, Joseph received the double portion that belonged to the main heir. And since he had 2 sons, each would represent a tribe, Ephraim and Manasseh. Instead of 1 tribe named after Joseph, there were 2. When Joseph took his sons to receive their grandfather's blessing, he positioned them in the traditional way: Manasseh, the eldest, on Jacob's right, and Ephraim, the youngest, on his left. The patriarch's right hand was reserved for blessing the firstborn, but Jacob deliberately crossed his hands. He placed his right hand on the head of Ephraim, the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh, the older. Joseph thought his father had become confused because of his poor eyesight and tried to correct him. "No, father, this one is the firstborn. Place your right hand on him." But Jacob replied firmly, "I know what I am doing. Manasseh will also be great, but his younger brother will be even greater, and his descendants will form a multitude of nations." as it is written in Genesis 48:14-19. It was not a mistake. It was prophecy, and that word was fulfilled in an impressive way. When the tribes of Israel settled in the Promised Land, Ephraim became one of the most powerful and influential of all. So much so that the name Ephraim came to be used as a synonym for the northern kingdom of Israel as a whole. The first king of that kingdom, Jeroboam, was from the tribe of Ephraim, as it says in 1 Kings 11:26. The capital, Samaria, was located in the territory of Ephraim. Prophets such as Hosea often referred to all of northern Israel simply as Ephraim. Manasseh also grew and formed a large tribe, but Ephraim remained above, just as Jacob had said. The blessing was not an empty ceremony. It was a prophetic statement that shaped the history of a people. But then a natural question arises. If Ephraim and Manasseh are now two separate tribes, and Joseph was Jacob's son along with the other 10, that would make 13 tribes in total. How then does the number 12 remain? The answer lies in the tribe of Levi. Numbers chapter 3 explains that the Levites were set apart to take care of the tabernacle and later the temple. They did not receive a territory like the other tribes. Instead of land, they received specific cities scattered among the other tribes to live in. Their inheritance was the Lord himself, as Deuteronomy 18 verse 2 says. Thus the 12 tribes that divided the territory were Reuben, Simeon, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Benjamin, Ephraim, and Manasseh. Levi served as priests. Joseph was present through his 2 sons. The number 12 remained perfectly intact. One thing that is very clear in this whole story is a pattern that appears repeatedly in the Bible. God chooses the lesser over the greater. Abel over Cain, Isaac over Ishmael, Jacob over Esau, Joseph over his older brothers, Ephraim over Manasseh, David over his brothers. This is no coincidence. It is a hallmark of how God acts, not according to human systems of hierarchy or apparent merit, but according to his purpose and grace. Joseph's story is also one of the most powerful stories of transformation. He was betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, and unjustly imprisoned. But each of these pains was part of the path that led him to the place where he could save his family and fulfill the promises made to Abraham centuries earlier. His sons, born in a foreign land to an Egyptian mother, were elevated to the same level as Jacob's sons. And in the end, Joseph forgave, Jacob blessed, and God wasted nothing. So let's recap everything we've seen today. Joseph does not have a tribe named after him because he received something better. 2 tribes through his sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. This double portion was the birthright, originally belonging to Reuben, who lost it because of his sin. Jacob formally adopted his grandsons, elevating them to the same level as his sons. When blessing them, he deliberately crossed his hands to give the greater blessing to Ephraim, the younger, and this prophetic choice was confirmed in history. The number 12 remained because Levi was set apart for priestly service without inheriting territory. Joseph, the son who was sold into slavery and forgave his brothers, ended up with a double legacy. His name is not on the list of territorial tribes, but his presence is greater than that of any other. 2 tribes, 2 territories, 2 lines of descent, carrying his heritage into the future of God's people. If you've made it this far, I hope this story has made sense to you in a new way. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments. What surprised you most about this story? The adoption of the grandchildren? Jacob's reversed blessing? Your participation helps the channel grow and continue to bring content like this. See you next time.